And that affected attitude to work. That to me was part of the problem.
Now, we've since been joined by Mr. Yomi Fawaimi, who's an education consultant. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, I think I'll just put to you the same question that she just finished answering, which is, how did we arrive at this pass from a place where our children, whether at primary or secondary or at tertiary level, could compete anywhere in the world? I mean, children were getting scholarships from abroad to go school abroad. And suddenly we find ourselves with graduates who can't even speak correct English. How did we arrive here?
Okay, a couple of things. I mean, so she has identified corruption, one of which that I find most significant for me are two critical things. One, lack of a vision for what we want to achieve with education. And secondly, poor leadership. So you had a combo, I mean, what you call a double whammy of a visionless system and lack of leadership. Now, I'm not describing lack of leadership by just the quality of leadership, but by the fact that there was no leadership. So between 1958 and 1978, the golden years of education in Nigeria, the time we were referring to, Nigeria had 5 ministers for education. Between 2004 and today, we have had 18. So what has happened is that you have had a situation where we had a minister that did 11 straight years for education. People talk about the glory days of the Awolowos and all of those things, but if you go back to check in history, the minister, or the commissioner as it was called under Awolowo, started that process 4 years before it was launched. So there was a lot of pre-planning and a lot of implementation out there. But what led to the planning was because of a vision. So you didn't have a vision, then you had poor leadership, which was also changing like you could change anything in the world. When you're talking about 18 ministers within the space of 20 years, then you're meaning that there's not going to be continuity. And you know the way we do leadership in Nigeria, once somebody new comes in, everything the other guy was doing, what they didn't do well. Yeah. So visionlessness coupled with poor lack of leadership is a double whammy. Nothing can be worse than that.
Professor, you're still in the system. We need to talk about the curriculum itself. We understand that schools don't teach history anymore. And they don't teach civic studies anymore, even though we hear that some schools are trying to reintroduce those subjects. I mean, so, for instance, a young man I met in the US is a pilot, went to school in Nigeria, and ran away about 2 years ago because he couldn't get a job in Nigeria. So in the course of discussion, we were talking about Nigeria, and I mentioned Yakubu Gowon, and he said, "Who is he? Is he a footballer?" And I wanted to punch his face. And I said, "You are over 30 years old, you're a Nigerian, and you're asking me if Yakubu Gowon is a footballer? You need to go and learn a little bit about your country."
Yes.
So if these children don't know any history, they don't know about the past of their country,
yes,
how are they going to plan for the future of their country?
It is difficult to do that. And it's only in Africa, I want to generalize now, that history has been relegated to the background. And Nigeria is one of those countries in Africa.
Coincidentally, you're a professor of history.
And of course, I remember when I was teaching at Imo State University in Owerri before I left, we were struggling to get enrollment of students to our program. And we decided to come out, we decided to become innovative by adding international studies in order to attract more students. Because, of course, I can understand everywhere all over the world, the humanities and social sciences are struggling behind the sciences at the STEM courses. But the difference is that in Nigeria, especially, history has been relegated to the background. And it's difficult for a country who pays little or no attention to history to advance. My colleague just mentioned the lack of focus, lack of vision. How can you have a vision when you don't know where you're coming from? And so to me, is a welcome development if some schools are beginning to revive and reintroduce history and civic education in their curricula. That will be wonderful. It is important for us to go back and teach our children, our youth, their history. They need to know about their heritage. We talk about intergroup relationships. How did our great-grandfathers interacted? Now we are talking of ethnic division, ethnic politics. There was a time, I'm not minimizing the fact that there were intergroup wars and so forth, but the level of ethnic divisiveness has reached a maximum point in Nigeria. And it has to be addressed by teaching our children, one of the ways anyway, their history, their heritage. And again, I was discussing with somebody I just met about lack of respect among our youth. That is another problem when parents no longer do their job because they are either overwhelmed by other requirements in terms of career choices and career demands and so forth. So it is important that we go back to the study of Nigerian history, especially the various ethnic nationalities.
Okay. We'll just take a short break and we'll come back and continue the conversation.
Well, before we go on that break, I think let her just clarify on this history part, because it's true that the bit of history, when you say we need to teach us our history in order to bring back unity in the country, do you think we're ready to go back to learning that history? Because it looks as if the older generation, and that's why it was taken out of school. That's what some people say, it was taken out of school. I mean, we've not forgotten you. It was taken out of school because the older generation don't want to think about the atrocities that were committed back in history. And they think if they let the younger ones learn this history, the unity that they are hoping to achieve won't be possible.
That is a mistake. It is unbelievable that the history, the major catastrophic event that has befallen this country since independence, I mean the Civil War, is not taught in Nigerian university or school system. Students need to know their history, no matter how ugly, because you learn from those ugly experiences in order not to repeat yourself.
Okay, all right. We'll take that break now. Please don't go away. Welcome back. We're talking education, the Nigerian education system. We went down to learning history so that we don't make the mistakes of the past. Yemi, when you started, you talked about between 2004 till date, we have about 18 ministers of education. The history behind was that between 1979, it was 1950 or thereabout, and 1979, there were just about 5 or thereabout ministers of education. You say that's where the chaos in the education system began.
Yeah.
How can we reverse this?
Okay, just a point on history. The Minister for Education has agreed that they're going to bring back our history.
Okay.
So history comes back to school. It's also important for us to...
At what level?
Well, he didn't say to that point, but he just said this will come back. Let's celebrate the coming back, and then we can start to negotiate that.
Exactly.
But it's also important for us to also look again at how we could put all of this in the right context. So one of the challenges that have happened to us is the fact that if you check the allocation of the Federal Ministry of Education, Federal Government of Nigeria, a huge chunk goes to education. So education has become a cash cow. As a result of that, it has become a GUC position. That's what we call those kind of positions in Nigeria. And that's what is responsible for the frequency of changes. No minister has been changed for failure in doing work in education. Not once. So what we have had is that because of the quantum of money that is in the education ministry, there's a lot of attention to get my person there. And that has been what has responsible for it over the time.
And it doesn't matter if my person is not achieving anything?
No, I think part of the qualities of my person, he must not know education before he came.
Oh, yeah, so that's a prerequisite.
Yeah, that seems like a prerequisite because it's predictable.
Okay.
So a minister was appointed. I'm not going to refer to the particular one. And I had to go and check when this minister was sworn in was screened in the National Assembly, they didn't ask this minister a single question about education because nobody thought this person would get the education ministry. And then I went to check the antecedent of this minister. All that he has written about, he had not written about education for once. And this minister was very active in writing. So we have people who come there. And it's not a problem if you don't know what is happening in the Ministry of Education. It's an opportunity for you to learn. It's called Ministry of Education. So maybe the minister himself needs education. But because of the fact that we have allowed people to feel, my role is to stop what was going on and start a new thing. So we must agree, one of the things we need to quickly do now is that we need to go back and rewrite our national policy on education. The last time we had a published national policy was in 2004. That is 22 years ago. That was the last time we had a national policy. Interestingly, the former Minister for Education actually came up with another national policy on education, but did not get it passed before he left office. And since part of the plan is always to start a new thing, we pretended as if it never existed. How do you run this nation on an educational policy that was published in 2004? It was published in 2004, not it was decided in 2004. So you understand how far behind. So now we are having issues with how does history fit into this game work? What has changed in the last 22 years that should come into our education? Because we don't have a policy to respond to that, we don't know how to deal with it. I give an instance, talking again about history. So we're talking a lot about gender equality and gender empowerment, and some people are saying, no, it's a foreign thing, it's not us, men are this. And I say, but let's go back to history. If you ever studied about a woman called Efunsheto Aniwura, Iyalode Ibadan, she was an Iyalode that was in charge of Ibadan at a point, very powerful. So when we say that women should be empowered, it's not a white man's idea. The Iyalode was the head of the women, and in the traditional council of the Kabiyesi in Yoruba land, there were two principal women. There was Iyaloja and Iyalode. Iyaloja was the minister for commerce. That's a way to describe what she does, because she determines what happens in the market. You hear of Madame Efinyola, you hear of Madame Tinubu, second Iyalode of Ijebode. You hear about how some women actually depose the traditional line in Yoruba land. So when people say, I need to recall a legislator, people say, it has not happened before. It has. It was a king. So that's why, but you know, the point is that our policy, so we now have a lot of discussion around gender, we have a lot of discussion around ethnicity. We need to get back to that policy, to use it to change, because education is a tool for training. You know, one very funny thing I always tell people, when people say, oh, okay, this ethnic group is better than this, or this is that, you know, people will say the nearest to the Yorubas are the Edos in the south, in Edo State, right? The closest language to the Yoruba language is not in the southwest, it's in the north central. The closest language to the Yoruba language is in the north central of Nigeria.
What language is that?
I'm not going to mention it. Let people should go and read about it. It's education.
Because my language is also very near Yoruba.
And that is?
Shakiri.
Yeah, so because it's almost a root. But the question, if we check the root of Yoruba, the closest Yoruba, and this is education, right? So, my role is to educate. So people should go and learn. What is the closest language to Yoruba? No, I'm not going to say it. It's education. We're doing education here. Part of education is...
We should go and research.
Yes.
Find it out.
Education is lighting a fire. So I've said, and that's one of the things we also need to do. We should stop having teachers that teach everything. Light a fire. Tell somebody, do you know that your grandfather was this? Oh, so where is that house in Ibadan? Go find out. That is what the child will never forget. The child could forget what you told him. And that's part of what we need to have in our educational policy. The last one I think we needed to do is that we need to get teaching back to where it should be. Please note, I did not say teachers.
Teaching.
There is what they call good teaching. There is what they call good teachers. Teachers make a difference. Good teaching makes a sustained difference.